Hi, Travathan here. This podcast is going to become very important in your life if you allow that. And here's why I say it. If you continue to listen to it, it most definitely will become important to you. And you may even want to share it around with your friends. We're going to be breaking down the difference between ordinary thinking and extraordinary thinking so that you can choose which way you want to go. Because you are the thinker in your life. The funny part about that is what we know from science is that your brain has no ability to think whatsoever. It can't think a single thought. That means you're being thought through. Ordinary thinking, which is the common thinking of the day, is a very ego-driven form of thinking. And if you just look out around your world, you will see that pretty much everywhere. It's hard to not see it once you understand that. And a lot of it is based on very heavy judgment, not only of others, but of ourselves. It's what we were taught to do. We were taught that we had to judge pretty much everything. And so we do. And so you look out in your world, on any given day, you'll see conflict. Lots and lots and lots of conflict. Turn on the news, you'll hear about the conflict globally. And before long, you won't feel that great. Extraordinary thinking is based on a knowingness of oneself from a very deep place inside where you truly understand who and what you are. Extraordinary thinking is not ego-driven. It is equality-driven. Very big difference. It wants the best for everyone. Unconditionally wants the best for everyone. Even your worst enemy, it wants the best for it. So it's an entirely different way to think. Now, it's not new at all. In fact, there's absolutely nothing new about it. We can go back to the beginning of time and we can see evidence of it. We can go even to the Bible and we can see evidence of it being spoken of. We can go into science, quantum physics, etc. We can see evidence of it spoken of. And in reality, it is the basis of our thinking. In fact, it is your extraordinary self that is thinking through you, for you, as you, with you. Now that may seem a little strange to you at this point, but if you continue to listen to the podcast as I put them out, it'll all start to come together. And then you will truly have the power of choice in your own hands. If you don't have the power of choice, I can tell you what it feels like. Victim thinking, stress, annoyance, disappointment. We could go on and on. The basis of all of it is judgment. Ordinary thinking tells you to judge yourself and others. Extraordinary thinking tells you don't judge anyone, including yourself. Because judgment is a no thing. It does no good whatsoever. Ordinary thinking would say if you're alone in a room by yourself, you're alone. And you could even end up getting lonely if you're alone too long. Because the ego doesn't understand all of the components of you. Extraordinary thinking is the extreme opposite. In extraordinary thinking, we know you're never alone. Now, my work of the last 40 years has been in teaching people about extraordinary thinking, being a counselor, a psychologist, and at this point in my life, I choose to be a coach because that way I can mentor people in the best way possible. So I coach people, I teach classes, I often work in Bob Proctor's organization. If you're familiar with Bob Proctor, if you saw the movie The Secret, you might be familiar with Bob. He was kind of sort of the star of the movie, so to speak. And his work relates to my work. I just go a little bit deeper, that's all. But what I want you to know today is what I consider extraordinary thinking to be. And I consider it to be the bridge over the morass. What is a morass? A morass could be a swamp, something that traps, something that confuses or impedes. That's what Webster calls a morass. And that's what I call it too. The ego loves to confuse you. It loves to create chaos in your life. It loves to create disorder. It loves to separate you from your extraordinary self because it's afraid of your extraordinary self. Because the ego feels fear. Your extraordinary self doesn't. So, extraordinary thinking is what I call the bridge over that morass. And what is a bridge? A bridge is a structure carrying something or someone. A bridge can also be a space and time. Bridging the gap is a familiar phrase that we all know. A bridge can be a place or a means of connection or transition. I look at ordinary thinking this way, and I even wrote this in a book called The Tender Art of Extraordinary Thinking that is no longer in print. This was written in the 80s, but it's still true today, and I may even put it back out in print. Ordinary thinking is the mental morass we humans have been conditioned to live in. It's uncomfortable, and we feel that. We don't always know what is uncomfortable. We just know that we are uncomfortable. We know something's missing, and we may even think that something's wrong with us. We desperately seek answers. Extraordinary thinking is the bridge that transcends the morass of the ego's fearful lies. So what's important for you to understand is you have been lied to. Now, I'm not saying that with any judgment on anyone's part, because the people who lied to you have been lied to. The people who lied to them were lied to, and so on, and so on, and so on. We've hit a place in our time of being on this earth, as a society, globally speaking, we've kind of hit the wall. And there are so many people who have splat against that wall and said, okay, enough is enough. And they started to look for some way over, under, around, or through that wall. Extraordinary thinking is a label, so to speak, given for a broad range of transitional thought patterns and forms and methodologies. And the really big question is, why do we human beings experience so much discomfort, so much fear, so much insecurity in our lives? Why do we hit that wall? Why have we hit that wall? Why it is that we feel what we feel is because we are the most mentally and spiritually evolved species on the entire planet, with the promise of power and dominion over all things. But why do we seem to be such a threatening stranger even unto ourselves? With that kind of power, why? Why are we so afraid of the shadows of our own fearful thoughts, so much so that we'll even passionately deny them? We'll deny that we even have them, and yet mentally we'll secretly cower in dark and foreboding corners of our own self-imposed prisons and pray that no one exposes our intensely insecure self. Why are we so insecure? We are because that is exactly what the ego wants you to experience. Oh, it's a hard taskmaster. It's a hard taskmaster. We'll do anything to protect ourselves, to defend ourselves against exposure. We don't want anyone to think we're weak ever. We'll just put it off on somebody else. And of course, we're always blameless, right? It's always someone else's fault. Someone else is to blame. We are the way we are because of something that happened in our past, etc., etc., etc. Well, extraordinary thinking goes much deeper than that. But I just want you to know that one of the reasons why you don't know exactly who and what you are, typically, is because no one ever told you. Not that they didn't mean to, they just didn't know to. And not that they didn't care about you, they just didn't know what to say. And none of it made sense to them anyway. But here's my reality about you. You are an extraordinary being. You are an extraordinary being attempting to fit into a preconceived, ordinary world. And like a square peg attempting to fit into a round hole, you're not going to fit. You never will. You were never meant to fit there. But this is what I know that I want you to carry away from this podcast. You are completely and totally extraordinary in every possible way. You just didn't know it, perhaps. And even if you knew a little bit about it, you might not know enough. Almost anything is possible for you within whatever limits you give yourself. Life is always the waiter at the table that's saying to you, "May I take your order, please?" You can have anything you want. The menu is unlimited. But I do need you to make a decision so that I can take your order. And the difficulty lies in the fact that the ego teaches you that there are extreme limitations everywhere you look. It teaches you to look outside in your world and make your decisions based on that world. But I'm going to say to you, an extraordinary thinking is the extreme opposite. You look inside for your answers, and this world out here is the putty in your hands. That's how strong you are. So did you make a mistake? No. You just mistook yourself for something less than you actually are. You actually thought you were ordinary. You really did. Most of you did. But you're not. You never were. And you never truly can be. Oh, you can think that you are. You can even convince yourself that you're ordinary and that you're limited to whatever guidelines this world has for you. But it won't ever make it true. So if you want to learn more about that, continue to listen to this podcast and feel free to contact me. Lee Travathan signing off. Have an amazing day.